Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Beck. I am a two-time 9-year survivor of breast cancer. I'm the patient programs assistant at Breast Friends of Oregon. And when I have time, I write at a blog called I Never Liked Pink. I'm so excited about my guest today because she just has this amazing program to really help women move on after cancer treatment. Her name is Dr. Megan Bernard, ND. She is a board certified naturopathic doctor and the founder of Flourish, the Roadmap to Recovery, which is a step-by-step cancer recovery and prevention method for women who just need that extra boost and want to feel empowered and energized after cancer treatment, which really includes all of us because we're all like low after cancer treatment. So we really need the help from individuals like Megan who create these wonderful programs. So welcome, Megan. And I'm so excited to talk to you today because you're another one of my international guests. You're in Nova Scotia. So I love that. I'm meeting people from all around the world. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started as a naturopath and why you really enjoy working with patients post-cancer. I know that's a tall order, so
I'll go through all of that. No big deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me into your community today. I'm super excited to be a part of what's going on with everything that you're doing. So as you mentioned, I'm a naturopathic doctor. I've been working with women through cancer treatment and after cancer treatment for about 5-6 years now. I basically got into it, just cancer has been a big part of my family in a way. So it's affected a lot of my family members. Mm-hmm. Something that I kind of experienced from a personal perspective. I've never had it myself, but through it, my family members, and just saw that there's a lot still to be done when it comes to helping people, supporting them throughout cancer diagnosis, and especially after finishing cancer treatment. It's just ever since I was in school, I've had a really keen interest in how cancer is just so prominent, but we still don't know a whole lot about it. Like a lot of people have it, but we still don't know a whole lot about how it starts and what causes it to grow and things like that. And just the biochemistry of it really kind of excited me. And then, yeah, that's just how it got started.
Well, and as we all know, cancer doesn't just affect the patient, it affects everyone in the family, caregivers, friends. So it's really important for all of us to be knowledgeable and know how to really help people who have the patients and help ourselves as caregivers and friends and family. So you as a naturopathic doctor, you are many survivors or people who are in treatment go seek out help from naturopaths because they're not getting exactly what they need from standard Western medicine, which is great because I think we really need to incorporate all aspects of the healthcare system to really become our true selves again after treatment. And so what happens to bodies? What are they going through after cancer treatment and why do they need a program like yours?
Mm-hmm. So especially after cancer treatment is a really big time to really look at nutrition and lifestyle changes. Whenever you go through cancer treatment, the chemo, the radiation, the surgery, the steroids, the antibiotics, the hormonal changes, like all of that can play a big toll on the body. All the tissues have been affected throughout the whole body. There can be cell damage, tissue damage that we need to rebuild. We need to kind of make new cells and to make new stuff and to help heal tissues that have been damaged through treatment, we need the proper nutrition. We need to kind of give the body what it needs to kind of grow. So that's kind of what happens throughout treatment and why it's really important to dig in afterwards and take a good look at helping to heal these processes.
Well, you just rattled off a whole host of things that are happening in the body. So I imagine you can't just go after this willy-nilly. You really need some kind of a plan.
Yeah, it's really important to have a plan, especially because everyone's so different. Like, even if you've had the same type of cancer as someone else, it's often a different treatment process for the person. And maybe you might get the same chemo, but perhaps you went through chemo a little bit differently. You had different side effects. So we really want to look at the person when it comes to creating a plan after finishing cancer treatment and figuring out what do you need, not what Sally down the street did and will that apply to you. We really want to know what's going to work for you. It's also really an important time to have a plan after treatment, because this is when you're highly motivated to make change. You just went through something really big and really scary, and you want to make sure that you're doing whatever you can to not have that happen again. So if you're really highly motivated at this time, let's really give you the right information. Let's really kind of plan out some steps for you to kind of get on the horse in the right way and really make some good changes here. So those are kind of really important reasons to have a plan afterwards, is we want something that works for you. And we want to kind of hit you in a time whenever you're highly motivated, when you can actually go ahead and feel like you're ready to make some nutrition and lifestyle changes, because it's not always easy.
No, it's definitely not easy. And especially coming out of treatment, while you may be motivated, I think most people are kind of lost, because while your medical team has done the best they can to remove the cancer from your body or help you live well if you are metastatic, you still don't know where to go. And I think the concerns of most are to probably recover faster, because you don't just want to sit there and be like, duh, or recover faster, and how to prevent recurrence, because that is a huge fear that is on probably everyone's mind. I know I'm 5 years out from my second go around, and I'm still concerned about how to prevent recurrence.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to prevent recurrence, like there's so many things that you can do as well, but it can seem very overwhelming, because you're probably taking in information from the internet, from books, from blog posts, from Facebook, and all these things. And it's really hard to kind of figure out, so what do I actually listen to, and where do I start? What do I do? Like, what's going to give me the most bang for my buck? And whenever we're working with people throughout all this, we hear all this, we understand where they're coming from. So what we try to do is we try to lay it out in a more like organized process. And typically this looks like looking at our 6 pillars of cancer prevention when it comes to reducing risk of recurrence. And our 6 pillars that we take people through in Flourish the Roadmap to Recovery, the first one's nutrition. Like, everyone always wants to know about nutrition. So we definitely want to start there with people. And it's so important to kind of, like I said, get the things into place to help heal those tissues. So we look at food. We also look at movement, exercise kind of thing, mindset, because we want to deal with the stress. We want to deal with the overwhelm. Digestion, detoxification, because if we're not having a good digestive system, we're not absorbing the nutrients that we're trying to eat so good, like all those salads we're taking in are probably not going to get broken down and absorbed as well if we don't have a good digestive system. Another thing would be the environment. So what can we kind of change within our environment to kind of reduce any like environmental exposures? And then the last thing is epigenetics, which we might get into later, but it's a whole kind of conversation on its own.
Okay. Well, I have no idea. I just want to know what that word means, because I have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So epigenetics are like little on and off switches that are on your genes. And what they do is they can kind of like be turned on or off depending on what's going on in your environment. And whenever they're turned on or off, they have different influences on your physiological processes. So like, how well do you react to caffeine, for instance, can be determined by epigenetics. Certain foods can kind of turn certain like genes on and off. And overall, they may influence certain other genes in your body, like cancer genes. So you can influence how you interact with your environment, what you eat, how you think, all that kind of stuff can have an influence on your genetic makeup, such as like cancer suppressor or cancer promoter genes.
Got it.
That was a big topic.
No, but it actually helps it, because I years ago did the ancestry.com, the swab, and did that. And then a few years later was seeing a nutritionist, and she took that data and put it into some magical place and came back, and we went over all of these things for my body in particular. And I found out that I'm a slow caffeine processor, which is super interesting to me, because my husband is always in awe. Like, I could drink caffeine right before I go to bed and have no problems. And my nutritionist was like, yeah, because it just, your body takes a long time to process it. I'm like, okay, cool. Random thought for the day. But so let's start with nutrition. What aspects of that should women focus on when they're done with treatment?
Nutrition is my favorite thing to talk about. So just interrupt me if I go on forever, because I could talk all day. But we really look at macronutrients being the protein, carbs, and fats when it comes to healing someone's body after finishing cancer treatment, because it's really these building blocks that get in and help to build new, like GI lining, like a gastrointestinal lining, for instance, to help kind of nourish the brain, to help to rebuild, like help with any skin healing, anything like that. So if you get a good amount of protein, carbs, and fats in your diet, then you're really helping to fuel these processes. So that's a big kind of thing that we look at whenever we're looking at nutrition for people who finish cancer treatment.
So I imagine this is probably pretty challenging, because there's so many different you don't want to say diets, because it's not a diet. It really needs to be a lifestyle change, but there's so many of these different programs out there. What do you think are like the biggest mistakes that people make when finishing cancer treatment in terms of nutrition or some of the other pillars?
I feel like the biggest mistakes is people try to go really like jump into something, like do a 360 turn basically and go very strict. and jump into fad diets and stuff like that when they're not really that motivating to continue on, because like you actually just mentioned there, it's a lifestyle. It's not just a quick fix or a diet that we're looking at. We really want people to learn how to establish habits in their day-to-day routines that become just a part of the way that they live. And by jumping into really strict diets, that's really hard to maintain for 10, 20, 30 years in the future kind of thing. And if we can kind of teach more habitual changes and small steps as opposed to going willy-nilly hardcore into like a really strict diet, then I find that's way more effective in the long run for people when it comes to feeling better faster and also to preventing cancer from coming back.
I was muted. Sorry about that. One thing that I have done recently that I'm very proud of myself is I've about 90% given up my Diet Coke addiction because I love it. That's like, I do. That's my biggest vice other than carbs, but I won't buy it for myself at home anymore. If I go out, I'll still allow myself, one, and I don't go out very often, but I realize that's cutting baby steps for me is how I need to do something, because like cold turkey, then it's like, oh my God, I want it so bad. I really want a Diet Coke. And, I'm like going to go drive through 7-Eleven right now to get a soda, but it's taking those baby steps, I think, that really can turn it into more of a lifestyle change than, okay, this is something I'm going to do for right now because I know it's good for me, but it has to become that habit.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming to think, oh, I've really got to turn everything and cut everything out 100%. And if I don't do this right, then it's going to be not effective. And that's just not the way that nutrition changes work, is small steps at a time, small changes. And it doesn't mean you have to 100% get rid of something that you enjoy or love to see a really big impact.
Well, and one thing, I have a nutritionist, fitness trainer that I also talk to. And one thing she really talks about is, even if you're working on making changes and you backslide, like you have a few cookies or you have some chips, it's like, it's not the end of the world. You just don't feel guilty about it. Just move forward, because like, if you feel guilty, then it comes into the shame and all these other things. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to establish good habits going forward. And, everyone has a moment where like, I really need that cookie, but
yeah,
I think just figuring out how to make the changes long-term so they will stay, so you will want to keep them, I think is the most important part.
I agree. Yeah.
So after treatment, you can work on your nutrition, but let's kind of bounce back a little bit. What are the most common side effects that you see in patients when they finish with cancer treatment?
Probably the biggest thing that we help our clients with is the fatigue that sticks around after finishing treatment. Whether it was chemo, radiation, a combination, surgery, the stress of going through treatment, fatigue seems to be like the number one thing. And also like brain fatigue, chemo brain fog, that kind of stuff pops up a lot. Other things we see quite often are the gastrointestinal issues like nausea, heartburn, like diarrhea, constipation can often stick around after treatment. And the other things, like the nice things, like the hot flashes that all these women have to go through, neuropathy, bone loss. Yeah. So those are the most common things that we see popping up after finishing cancer treatment. And kind of the quicker we can dig in and help support people's bodies with nutrition and stress reduction and sleep and all that kind of jazz, the faster we can see these symptoms go away or at least reduce drastically, which is nice.
And that is good. And unfortunately, sometimes for women like myself, I am on the 10-year medication, post-treatment. So I take the aromatase inhibitors, and I am the poster girl for side effects. Like you name it, I've got it. I'm sure I will take my sweatshirt off here pretty soon because of a hot flash and I have the joint pain. And so I try to do all these different things to lessen my side effects, because I've been doing this for 5 years now. So I've figured out what works well for me. For the hot flashes, I do Chinese herbs and acupuncture, and that also helps my joint pain. I take a lot of supplements with magnesium and turmeric. And, I've found the things that really help not de-amplify, but tone down my symptoms. And for me, I've found that I, have a combination of melatonin and gummies that I take at night to sleep. So I've literally tried all of the things.
And I love that you're active and you go out and you seek out options and you're not just sitting back. Like, that's fantastic. I love hearing those stories.
Well, especially doing what I do now, talking to wonderful professionals like you who have these great solutions. It's like, I would be remiss if I didn't try all of these things.
Yeah, you got so many options now.
So what are some of the important steps that you would say to put together a post-treatment recovery and prevention plan?
I would say the most important thing is to look at the person and do like an individualized plan and figure out what's going to work for them. Because if I tell someone to do a strict diet and it's just not going to work for their family, their lifestyle, it overwhelms them, then it's just not going to work. So we kind of take a good look at what's going on for them, maybe pick apart a few blocks that might be getting in the way of them making a change, and then kind of laying out a process from there. So that's like the number one thing I think of. But just to kind of get a little bit more detailed, like we always look at blood work, for example, because we want to see things like, where's your vitamin D at? D as in dog. Where's your B12? Where's your iron? What's your inflammatory levels like? Because this just gives us a good like starting point to start measuring progress along the way as well, and to just see where can we focus our attention. And then the other big thing that we consider is just outlining their goals. Like, what do you want to see happen? Where are you at right now? And then breaking it down into manageable steps, and just something that's not going to completely throw them for a loop and say, this is everything that you got to get done. But let's say, like, this is where we're aiming. Let's see where we can start, and kind of like, how can we get to the next step? Once we're there, how can we get to the next step? So those are kind of things that we want to look at when we're creating a recovery and prevention plan, because people are like overwhelmed. Their brains probably aren't working as well as they want them to work. They're fatigued. They've got a lot going on, probably stepping back into work, and they're busy. So just keep it as simple as possible, and know that even like a small change can make a big difference.
Perfect. We're definitely going to dig more into all these changes, but we do need to take a short break. Remember, listeners, you can make a donation on our website or by texting BF Radio to 41444 to help Breast Friends continue on its mission to ensure that no woman goes through cancer alone. You can also go on our website and look at all of our patient programs to see what we could do for you. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Michelle Beck, and my guest is Dr. Megan Bernard. We've been talking about the steps to reduce the risk of recurrence and speed up recovery post-treatment. See, that's where my brain fog still comes in sometimes. Like you just mentioned, there are so many things that you can really have side effects for, the symptoms post-treatment. And I'm not going to lie, I'm 5 years out and I still have brain fog, and I didn't even have chemo. So I can't even say that. It's just, I have cancer brain. And I know for me personally, I've done a little bit of research on it, the lack of estrogen, because I've had my ovaries removed, that really affects your brain health and your short-term memory. So that unfortunately is something that I struggle with as well. And even though like my brain can process, sometimes it just doesn't get to my mouth. Now, I imagine the recovery time is different for everyone because they've gone, while you might be on a similar cancer treatment path, each person's journey is different. So how long, is there a standard time that you say to someone, okay, you're going to feel better in 6 months? Or does it really vary depending on the individual?
It can very much vary depending on the individual, but I find that variation kind of depends more on what can they manage, what are they willing to change, that kind of stuff, as well as like what treatment they had, and how long ago did their journey start, that kind of stuff. Typically speaking, though, I find whenever people can get the right nutrition, the right lifestyle changes like sleep, stress reduction, exercise into place, then we can see a change in as little as 4 to 8 weeks sometimes.
Wow,
but again,
okay.
it does depend on the person.
Mm-hmm.
And some people, they do suffer with the side effects for 6 months, a year, something like that. I think that's just generally the standard whenever you're released from your treatment plan and with your medical doctor. It's like, when should I start to feel better? It's usually like, oh, wait on about 6 months. It might take about 6 months to start to feel better. Mm-hmm. But I do find we can make a difference with that.
See, for me, I know that I didn't start being proactive about taking care of myself post-treatment for a while. I had a young son at home. I'd been through a mastectomy and reconstruction and the oophorectomy and all of those things. And I was just really focusing on just getting through each day. And so I didn't know at that time that there was all these other options out there for me until I started volunteering at Breast Friends and connecting with practitioners and hearing the different stories of women who had been through it before me. And I think that's one thing that's actually really important about, that's a whole separate episode, but about finding your tribe and finding connection, because everyone, if they have that heart, they can help people who come behind them. You know, this is what I love, what I do. I hope that things that I've gone through and all the people that I bring on the show, they really are helping listeners who are right there in the thick of it, so they can know, oh my gosh, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we can help you. And there are different things to do. So I think that's so important. Let's talk about one of the things that is near and dear to my heart, unfortunately, is joint pain. So what recommendations do you have for someone who is possibly taking, whether it's tamoxifen or any of the aromatase inhibitors that can cause the joint pain? For me, like, I feel like my knees have no like liquid in them. They're just like, and they don't want to move. And it's not that they're hurting all the time. They just don't want to work. They're stiff. So what recommendations do you have for something like that?
Yeah, joint pain is really tough. And sometimes like we can reduce the overall feeling of like the pain, and maybe give like more good days than bad, but it is one of those things that loves to stick around. But what you mentioned before, like acupuncture, there's actually some really beautiful literature showing that acupuncture can help with the side effects from hormone medications, like the hot flashes and the joint pain. So a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist would be a good choice that way to see if you can see some relief. We've also chatted with people about chatting with their prescribing physician to see if they can switch to different brands, because there's different like companies that make the hormone meds, and maybe try switching up their doses, and that can make a difference too when it comes to joint pain. Never do it on your own, and we wouldn't advise on this either.
Sure.
We really want the prescribing physician to be a part of it. Just gentle movement as well. It doesn't have to be like hardcore marathon running or anything like that to make a difference, but just nice walking. Water sports are actually really good too, like swimming. And then overall, just reducing inflammation in the body, and just making the body more balanced with regards to all the way that it heals itself and all the different physiological mechanisms going on. All these can kind of help to reduce the joint pain and any side effects from aromatase inhibitors.
Well, and it's all kind of connected, because I know just from my own research that reducing the inflammation goes back to your nutrition and your diet and the different things that you're putting in your body that can be very inflammatory. Like, for one thing, like I believe that I've read like tomatoes are bad for if you're trying to reduce inflammation. I love tomatoes. I could eat like 8 tomatoes a day, but my body is like, no, those are not good for you. So it's trying to find what works for your own body.
Exactly. And it could be different from someone else. Like, they might not see the impact of tomatoes on their body, but everyone's just so different. There's a lot we still don't know about how certain foods react with certain people's genes and stuff like that. So it's worth the experiment often to see if that's a food for you.
It really, and it's just being your own advocate, figuring out what works for you, talking to your medical professionals, finding a naturopathic physician like yourself to help people figure out what is going to work best for them. And like you mentioned, like the exercise and slow and gentle movement. For me, I have pain in my hands and the palms of my hands and my feet from the medication as well. And it's different at different times of the day. So like a long walk is painful for me with the joint pain. I have found, we got a Peloton bike a while ago. I love it because I'm not putting the immense pressure on my joints, even though they're moving, and I'm not having the pain in the bottom of my feet from walking. So it's something that I can do. And I love that. I did try a yoga class the other night for the first time through Peloton. And I'm like, oh, I used to be a big yoga proponent. I was, a long time ago, but I loved it. And now I did this beginner class. I'm like, oh my God, my joints hurt. I can't do a downward facing get from here to downward facing dog. I was, and the surgery on my shoulders and stuff on my arms. It's like, okay, well, this is different, but I can still make adjustments to figure it out. So I think that's really important, just figuring out what works for you. And it can definitely take time.
Yeah, time is a big factor. Yeah. And slow and steady wins the race.
I love that. I was driving home from who knows where yesterday, and my husband's like, drive safe. And I'm like, slow and steady is my jam now.
Yeah, we need to all just kind of relax throughout life. I think the fast-paced world just doesn't have anything on pura vida, which is what I learned in Costa Rica recently. The pure life, the nice calm life.
Yeah. I mean, we can't always do calm overall, but finding the little steps. Like I have a guest coming up. We recorded yesterday, but she's on in a few weeks talking about just mindfulness and how meditation can help your day and breath work. And it all works together. So let's go back to the things we're putting in our body. Are there supplements that we should avoid during or post treatment?
Yeah, I mean, generally they're pretty safe, and just reading the label can usually tell you a whole lot as well. But there are a few that I tend to watch out for that I find a lot of people come to me on, and we might take a step back and see, like, is it actually useful, and maybe go through some potential negative impacts of it. And something that I often see people self-prescribing is vitamin B12, and usually they're taking it because they got neuropathy and learned that that might help with their neuropathy. And we want to watch B12 levels when it comes to cancer, because B12 can kind of push DNA turnover and push cells to grow faster. So that can include healthy cells, but it can also include cancerous cells. So we want to make sure that we're not overdoing it on the vitamin B12, for instance. The other one is iron. We really want to check blood levels of both B12 and iron before we do any sort of prescribing, because iron, again, can kind of encourage more cell growth. It can kind of encourage more inflammation if it's in excess, if we're taking too much. And then the other thing would be, I often want to make sure that people aren't taking too much curcumin, or often even just taking curcumin when they're doing something like tamoxifen. There are some studies showing that the curcumin may interact with some of the same enzymes that curcumin or that tamoxifen gets metabolized and broken down through. So we just want to make sure that we're checking for any potential interactions between anything that someone's taking and the medication that they're on.
Totally makes sense. And doesn't iron give you energy? So people would be like, oh, I'm going to take iron because I'm just feeling really down. But like, no, it could really have really bad effects for you. And one thing that's not really a supplement that I didn't know my first time around is grapefruit. Grapefruit can interact with medications and, cause them to just not really work very well. So I tell everybody that watch your grapefruit intake. I don't care what cancer meds you're on, just stop.
Smart. Yep. You're right. Yeah.
Do you have favorite supplements what do you recommend that people should be taking?
I love food. Like, we always try to go food first, because again, it's more sustainable, but there are certain supplements that we do often put people on more commonly, such as like vitamin D. Vitamin D, it's my favorite vitamin ever. It's involved in so many different processes in the body. So there's also a lot of research showing that it can improve cancer outcomes. So if someone's going through treatment, like they have active cancer, and that their vitamin D levels are actually within the optimal ranges, they tend to have better outcomes, so better quality of life, and like less disease progression, that kind of stuff, if their vitamin D levels are at a good level. So we always do blood work to figure out what people's vitamin D levels are. Another thing that I often see in breast cancer is we want to look at melatonin. So you mentioned melatonin gummies that you might be taking there, but melatonin can also kind of play a role potentially in breast cancer development. So and we also often see a lot of people with difficulty with sleeping. So melatonin can help with that as well.
Okay, so you just said melatonin and breast cancer development. Can we go back to that and talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so melatonin is a sleep hormone. So like whenever it gets dark out, your eyes register that, your brain registers that, and it makes you tired. And that makes you tired because it's producing the melatonin. Okay. But at higher doses, we find that, or we know that melatonin can be more like an antioxidant, and antioxidants are really great for protecting against oxidative damage. So just damage that may go out and hit some of these cells and cause them to become more cancerous or have more cancerous potential. So they're doing some studies, or they've done some studies showing that women who may work different professions or have different ways that they have less melatonin being produced, so perhaps they're not exposed to darkness as much, may be at an increased risk of having breast cancer. Does that make sense? Everything I just explained? Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the opposite way, like that it was, leading towards recurrence. I'm like, no, please. I like my melatonin.
Keep it up. Yeah, it's all good. It's good stuff. Yeah.
And let's go back to vitamin D for a second, because you and I both live in places where it's not super sunny all the time. And especially I'm in the Pacific Northwest and you in Nova Scotia. But we just don't get a lot of sun. And I moved here from Southern California, and I had no idea that I should have been supplementing with vitamin D at that point. And now I take a ridiculous amount, and my oncologist, we talk about how much I take, and I get tested every 6 months, and I'm still in a good level, but I have to take so much to stay in that good level. So the blood work is so important. And it's definitely like in my, my everyday toolkit. And that's definitely something that listeners, you should talk to your practitioners about that and make sure you're getting enough vitamin D, because it's definitely helps reduce the recurrence and, will keep you on the right track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, blood work is like totally key when it comes to those kind of vitamins like vitamin D, because like you said, like someone could come and they'd be like, oh, I've been taking 10 drops for like the last couple of months. I'm sure my levels are fine, but we still test and still not quite there. And the type of vitamin D supplement you take can also be important. The liquid form is usually the best absorbed in vitamin D3 as opposed to D2. Those kind of things can all be important factors in getting the right amounts in your bloodstream.
And is it true that if you take it with vitamin K, it helps get into your body better? Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah. So they kind of like help with the absorption. The K and the D work together. One thing I would watch for though, like for instance, if you're taking 10,000 IU a day, sometimes they combine the K and the D in one supplement. And we want to make sure that if you are taking 10 drops to get your vitamin D levels, that you're not taking 10 drops of the combo, because then you'd be like overdosing on your vitamin K. So we do need less vitamin K than we would need vitamin D typically. So just watch your doses if you are planning on taking the K and the D together.
What does K do otherwise?
Well, K it's very important in a bunch of different things. So like it can be involved in blood clotting and bone absorption, things like that. You get K in like dark green veggies, those kind of things too can be important for your teeth even. So yeah, but mostly we use it for helping with vitamin D absorption.
Okay. You had mentioned one thing earlier that I want to talk about as well is bone health. What can we do to, because I know for me, the aromatase inhibitors, they're bad on my bones, but it's helping prevent cancer reoccurrence. So you have to choose the lesser of the evils. And I just had a back injury back in August. I fractured a vertebrae and it just was not healing. And it's just because my bones are not as healthy as they used to be. Is there anything we can do to help prevent the bone loss that might come with these medications?
Yeah, it is tough because bones are stubborn. They don't like to be protected all the time. And then whenever estrogen goes away, it's even less protected kind of thing. But the bone meds that you typically get, like the bone kind of building meds, they actually work by preventing breakdown. So those are good if you can get the like Zometa, those kind of medications. Other things are just like exercise, strengthen your muscles, because if we have stronger muscles, they'll be able to kind of protect the bones from any sort of injury. So exercise, I think that's a big reason why exercise is so pushed after finishing treatment and during treatment as well, on top of a bunch of other great things. But things like vitamin D, vitamin K, calcium, magnesium, there's something called hydroxyapatite. You can get these in supplement form, sometimes all in one pill, to kind of supplement what you might be getting from your food to help to extra protect your bones.
Now, the magnesium can also help with your overall state of calm as well, right? It's really good to take. And I imagine is that something you get nutrient wise? And if you're not focusing on it, or you really have to look for magnesium in your diet?
It is tough because magnesium is typically found in things like legumes, so like lentils, chickpeas, beans, those kind of things, and veggies, which both of those are kind of hard to get into our diet sometimes because one, they aren't delicious, like birthday cake and pancakes and stuff like that. Like I agree. And two, like it's just we're busy. We can't get them in that way too, because they're just not easy to kind of grab and go. So if you feel like you're not getting enough veggies, if you feel like you're not getting a lot of legumes, then magnesium could be something to really focus on. It's also in shellfish too. But we do often find we are supplementing people with magnesium because we get people to take it before bed. It helps us sleep. It can help with a lot of people who have a lot of anxiety, and just kind of overall, it can even help with energy levels, that kind of stuff.
What about sugar and cancer? There's a lot of talk out there. What is true?
Yeah, the big question, right? The way I look at it is, if we could just eliminate sugar, then we would have no cancer left, if that were the big kind of major cause of that. And I'm sure everyone would want to do that. But we do know that some level of sugar is safe in a day-to-day basis. Like it's okay to have your cookie if you want your cookie now and then. But what sugar can do is it's going to feed cells, because it is an energy source for both healthy and cancerous cells. So it can technically fuel cancer. And I think that's what people mean whenever it says that sugar feeds cancer. And the big thing I find is that it also can stimulate inflammation. It can also dysregulate insulin levels. Insulin's a known growth promoter, that kind of stuff. So there is something to consider when it comes to reducing sugar and improving your cancer recurrence rates, like making sure that doesn't come back. But I don't want people to be absolutely terrified of sugar because they're thinking that cookie that they really enjoy is going to be something really destructive. It's not.
Moderation. So we do need to take a short break, but I wanted to remind the listeners out there, if you would like to be a guest on my show or tell me your warrior story that I can read that tells us what inspired you after cancer or how your life has changed for the better since cancer, please email me. I'm at michellebeck@breastfriends.org. Stay with us. We'll be back soon. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Michelle Beck, and my guest is Dr. Megan Bernard. And we've been talking about how to stay healthy after cancer, speed up recurrence, and how to just feel better. And post-treatment is such a scary time. And for many, it's not like they're like, oh, I want to go start in this amazing exercise regimen. So what steps do you have for women who want to start exercising, but just might not feel great? How do you get started on some kind of a program like that?
Yeah, it is tough because like myself, I really don't like exercising. So it's kind of hard sometimes it's hard to push yourself to do these things. So I think the number one thing is just to like take a look at what are you willing to do? What can you manage to start with? And not to think like, oh, I got to start exercising and I must do it 4 or 5 days a week. And if I don't do it, then I'm failing. Like, let's just see, what can you do once a week? So let's just kind of start super simple. And realize that there's not just one exercise that's going to be the absolute best. It's about what's going to work for you and kind of meeting you where you're at. Because you mentioned yourself, like if you get sore palms and like the bottom of your feet, like walking is going to be really hard. So what can we do instead that might be more manageable for you? There are certain guidelines in place, like the World Health Organization, for instance, kind of recommends like 180 about minutes a week of like moderate intensity exercise, where it's like you can't sing, but you can talk. So that would be like what moderate intensity exercise is. But I feel like that's more of a goal. We don't need to get you there like tomorrow.
Yeah, that's so not going to be like, you finished treatment last week, I want you moving for 3 solid hours, which I would look at that and be like, no.
Yeah. So heck, if you can go for like a 5-minute walk through your house, just do that. And that's totally fine. And we just got to build up from there and not become unmotivated and overwhelmed with everything that you should be doing. Let's just see where we can kind of get you started.
Well, and it's kind of scary how fast you can lose, even if you were super fit and a regular exerciser pre-treatment. After treatment, your body has changed and been through so much. And even for me, last year I was doing really good on my Peloton. I was riding 4 or 5 times a week. I had good stamina, and then I hurt my back and I was off for about 5 months until I really felt comfortable getting back on again. And I've been so frustrated because I don't have that stamina anymore. And like a 20-minute ride is kicking my ass, where I used to be able to like do 30-minute hard rides. And now I'm like, oh, so it's really about just building that up again and taking the time and not being hard on myself. Cause I mean, I get it. It's just, but I'm really motivated to get back at it because I know it's really good for me.
Yeah, a lot about exercise is more like mindset and acceptance and simplicity, as opposed to going to the gym every day. And like, I think we do get people who are like athletes, and like you said, they're used to being more active and they are ready to get into it. But it's about kind of having them understand that you're going to be a little bit behind doesn't mean you're not still making some progress. So you got it.
And you talked about mindset just then. And what if your mindset right now is just pure stress because you're wondering, oh my gosh, is my cancer going to come back? And that's a big issue for me. And I'm 5 years out, which is what a lot of people consider a really good goal to get to. But I still stress about it. How do I get through this?
It's totally a normal feeling to feel that stress. And I think that's something that should be kind of acknowledged and recognized as well, because I think there's not much that's harder out there than going through cancer treatment. And it's really hard on you. It's hard on your family, that kind of stuff. So it's going to take a toll for longer than 5 years, even if they say 5 years is a safe kind of point. So it's totally understandable for people to feel that way. One way that we do help people to focus on reducing that stress is by looking at making some changes to feel good, and not necessarily on making changes just to kind of keep cancer away. So we don't want you to like go to that yoga class because yoga has been shown in the research to not have cancer come back. We want you to go to that yoga class because it's helping you to become stronger and to feel more comfortable in your body and to get more energy. So we want to focus on those kind of positive aspects, as opposed to looking at, oh, we're just going to do this because it's going to keep cancer away. because then always thinking about cancer just kind of gets stuck in your head. It's really hard to let that go. But if we start to kind of train the brain to think more positively on the energy and on the better sleep and on the stronger muscles, then that is a way better motivational factor than something that's kind of just always going to be hanging over your head that doesn't really have a tangible kind of feel to it. Make sense?
100%. And a couple of things that I've actually started recently, a gratitude journal, which seems like everyone's like, oh, everybody really talks about that. But honestly, if you take a few minutes every day and write just what you're grateful for that day, or a few things that went well that day. And if you go back and look at them later, and like, it compiles quickly. Like, yes, I may have been through cancer treatment and I'm struggling with this, and this, but I've got all these wonderful things. Like, I just spent a wonderful weekend with one of my best girlfriends and her son and our boys. We had a great time. I'm so grateful for that. Was the walking a lot that we did hard? Yes, it was, but I'm here and I'm able to do it. And one thing also, in a book that I just read for a future guest, called When Women Rise, it's talking about finding a mantra that works for you, that you can just say whenever you're having a moment and you just need it. And I found one. It is, I'm grateful for this body, this breath, and this life.
Oh, yeah.
So no matter what is going on in my life, I'm here, and I can deal with the side effects and I can deal with the pain because I'm here, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. So I think it's finding that right mindset wherever you find it is super important.
No, that's awesome. And I love mantras. I love gratitude journals and just positive thinking in general, because our brains are naturally tuned to want to think about the negative because it's a protective mechanism. It's how we stay out of trouble. It's how we make sure that we stay healthy and stuff like that, is we think about all the bad things out there. So by doing gratitude journaling, by having a mantra, this kind of trains our brain to start thinking more positively, to focus on the positive and put that negative stuff kind of further in the past so that we can live our lives a little bit better.
Nice. And talk about living our lives better. One thing that is super important is sleep, which is, I know, one of the pillars we talked about. I definitely struggle with sleep issues. And until I found what worked for me, I couldn't fall asleep. When I did, I was wide awake at 3 o'clock again, which is, the witching hour for many. And I know the reasons why behind it, but what strategies do you have that could possibly help for people post-treatment with sleep?
Yeah, sleep is like a little bugger. It's like the hardest thing to change. It takes the longest thing to kind of see an impact. But if you can kind of stick with some certain, they're called like sleep hygiene changes, then it can really make a difference. And sometimes it might take like a couple of weeks, even a couple of months to really see a big impact. But certain things like establishing a bedtime and a wake routine. So if you go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time, and not allow yourself to kind of sleep a little bit for, like, in the morning, you fall back to sleep for half an hour, you're up for a little bit, like that can really disrupt something called your circadian rhythm, which is that sleep wake cycle. So bedtime and wake time at the same time, no napping.
I love naps.
I know. Everyone hates me for that one. It's funny because I always say, you're going to hate me the most whenever we're working on your sleep, but you're going to love me the best at the end of it whenever you see the results, because working with sleep can really be torturous for a lot of people. But if we can kind of really dial in and be really strict with a lot of these things, you can really see a big difference. But yeah, no napping. Yeah, limiting caffeine, all these things. You're probably going to be a little bit more tired in the beginning when we start making sleep changes, but it's for like a long-term outcome. Even like my favorite is a sleep routine. Do you have any sort of like sleep routine established yet?
When I'm trying to fall asleep, I do usually do a sleep meditation, or I listen to a story on the Calm app, because I'm one of those people that I can't shut my brain off. So if I'm listening to something that I'm not super invested in, but that I can focus on, it allows me to actually fall asleep better than I would without it.
Smart. It's like a bit of a distraction so that your thoughts can kind of be focused as opposed to trying to wake you up. But no, that's great, because sleep routines are important. So like we establish sleep triggers. So sometimes just having the same cup of herbal tea before bed can start to like tell your brain that we're getting ready for sleep now. Let's try to remember to do that tea and get ready for sleep. So little sleep triggers like that can be beneficial too.
Yeah. One thing that I definitely struggle with, I get my best sleep in the mornings. Like literally, but I will wake up all throughout the night, and then I could sleep until 10, but my lifestyle doesn't allow me to sleep until 10 every day, because the alarm goes off at 6:30 to get my son to school and the dogs and all that. So I'm not going to lie. I do sleep in on the weekends when I can. And then I'm sure I pay for it overall, but I love sleep.
It's totally fine. Maybe something like a sleep lamp can be beneficial for people who have trouble waking up in the morning, like earlier, where you get like a sunlight lamp, and having that sit in front of you can help to reestablish that circadian rhythm where it starts to boost that cortisol that should go up in the morning to wake you up. And then that can then allow your melatonin to kind of go up in the darkness and put you to sleep a little bit earlier.
Interesting. Okay. So let's move back. And I want to talk more about the epigenetics because I think that whole thing is super cool. So you explained what it was, but how does it work?
Yeah, so what we do is a test. It's usually just a saliva test. It's kind of like if you do the ancestry.com, 23andMe, anything like that, you can kind of take that raw data and put that into another program. And then it comes up with things like how well do you like metabolize carbohydrates? How responsive are you to certain antioxidants in your body? Something as simple as like it tells you a little bit about caffeine. It can tell you about like lactose intolerance, those kind of things. And we take that information that's kind of based on your epigenome, your genetics, and then we can then kind of customize the way that you eat, the way that we establish sleep patterns, focus on certain proteins, for instance, focus on maybe reducing carbohydrates or increasing healthy fats. So we can kind of just take this information that's kind of based on your body and then customize any nutrition and lifestyle changes going forward with that.
Now, if we have listeners out there who are interested in doing something like this, but they can't see you because you're in Nova Scotia, do you have ways that you could do it virtually? Like they could do home tests and then like send you the information and you could plug it into your magic system?
Yeah, I actually work 100% virtually now. I'm all online and work with people across North America. So if anyone's interested, we could chat about that. Or most nutritionists or naturopathic doctors or functional medicine practitioners who might be in your area as well would offer a test similar to this. Okay. And I would work with a practitioner on this one because it can be complicated. Sometimes you can get these tests and it actually has all the information written out for you, but then it's like 12 or 15 or 20 pages of information. And you're like, whoa, do I have to do all of this? So having a practitioner in your area who does epigenetic testing, if you just ask for epigenetic testing, they can usually just send you home with a kit. You can order a kit online. You just do your own spit test and send off the results. Super simple. Got it.
Something that really is key to my cancer because it fed on estrogen both times. How can we reduce estrogen in our bodies? Because many breast cancer feed on estrogen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the best way to really reduce estrogen is have a good bowel movement. And if anyone has ever worked with a naturopathic doctor, they know how much we love talking about poop. The way that estrogen gets eliminated from your body is through bowel movements. So if we can kind of maintain regular bowel movements throughout the day, that means that it's not just kind of sitting in your intestines, getting reabsorbed back into the bloodstream and redistributed throughout the body. So if we can just encourage regular bowel movements through exercise can help with bowel movements, getting enough fiber, enough water, and making sure that you have good gut microflora. So the little microorganisms that are in your gastrointestinal tract, make sure that those are nice and good for metabolizing and digesting and moving things through your system.
Got it. I've never heard that before. So thank you for teaching me something today.
No, my pleasure.
about poop.
Yeah, I talk about poop all the time. Yeah.
So unfortunately, gosh, we are almost out of time. So can you tell our listeners how they can reach out to you and find out more about your programs and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me over on Facebook or Instagram if you look at Megan Bernard ND. I also have a Facebook community group, 4,000 plus members right now. It's called Getting Your Health Back After Cancer.
Oh, I'm going to have to sign up for that because obviously didn't find that when I was looking for you.
No, happy to have you.
No, perfect. Megan, thank you so much for being here today. So wonderful to be able to share. And I really hope that, our listeners reach out because you just have such good philosophies and to find your Flourish After Cancer program and flourishaftercancer.com, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's my website. Yeah.
And listeners, she definitely has a lot of great stuff on Instagram and I follow her there. So at Megan Bernard MD. So listeners, if you or a loved one need our services, please visit breastfriends.org. You can make a donation on our website or by texting BF Radio to 41444 to ensure that no woman goes through cancer alone. You can find this show on many platforms, Voice America's Health and Wellness channel, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you would like to be on my show, you can nominate yourself or submit your warrior story to Michelle Beck at breastfriends.org. Megan, again, thank you so much for being here today. It's been such a pleasure.
My absolute pleasure as well.
And listeners, we'll be back next week. And until then, remember, we rise by lifting each other.